Chapter 1. A Life of Scraps. The sprawling marketplace of Zenthra Prime was a cacophony of lights, sounds, and smells, a bustling hub where beings from every corner of the galaxy converged. Traders shouted to advertise their wares, holograms flickered with glowing sales pitches, and the air buzzed with the languages of dozens of species. Amid this vibrant chaos, no one noticed the small figure huddled in the shadows near a refuse pile. Rin, a young alien girl of the Kyverian species, was thin and disheveled, her silvery skin dulled by grime, and her once bright eyes clouded with exhaustion. The faint glow of her bioluminescent patterns had all but faded, clear sign of malnutrition among her kind. She crouched low, her delicate hands sifting through discarded food containers and scraps left behind by careless market-goers. Rin's stomach growled as she uncovered half a fruit, bruised and covered in dirt. She hesitated only a moment before wiping it on the sleeve of her tattered cloak and taking a cautious bite. The taste was bitter, but it was enough to stave off the gnawing hunger that had become her constant companion. As she chewed, she glanced warily around the marketplace. The crowd moved past her without a second glance, their attention focused on the stalls and vendors. For Rin, this anonymity was both a curse and a blessing. No one cared enough to stop her, but no one cared enough to help, either. A chance encounter. It wasn't until a shadow fell across her that Rin realized someone was standing nearby. She froze, her heart pounding as she looked up to see a human man watching her. His face was weathered but kind, his dark eyes scanning her with concern rather than judgment. He wore simple clothing work boots, a jacket patched in several places, but his presence was commanding. "What are you doing?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. Rin swallowed the piece of fruit in her mouth, her instincts screaming at her to run. But her legs refused to move, and her voice came out in a trembling whisper. I'm just eating." "Off the ground?" the man asked, his brow furrowing. Rin's cheeks flushed, the faint glow of her patterns flickering with shame. "I don't have anywhere else to go." The man sighed, crouching down to her level. "Name's Kalen," he said, his tone softening. "What's yours?" Rin hesitated, her eyes darting between Kalen's face and the crowd behind him. "Rin," she said finally. "Well, Rin," Kalen said, standing and extending a hand to her. "How about you come with me? I know a place where you can get a proper meal." Rin stared at his hand, her mind racing with doubts. She had learned long ago not to trust strangers, especially ones who offered kindness so freely. But there was something about Kalen's demeanor that felt genuine. Against her better judgment, she reached out and took his hand. The restaurant invitation. The walk to the restaurant was short, but it felt like an eternity to Rin. Kalen didn't say much as they weaved through the crowded streets, and she followed him in silence, her eyes darting nervously at every passerby. When they arrived, Rin's eyes widened in awe. The restaurant was small but inviting, its front illuminated by a soft golden glow. The scent of freshly cooked food wafted through the air, making Rin's stomach growl loudly. She ducked her head in embarrassment, but Kalen chuckled. "Don't worry," he said, opening the door for her. "You'll be eating soon enough." Inside, the restaurant was warm and cozy, with wooden tables and a holographic fireplace flickering on one wall. A handful of patrons were scattered throughout, their quiet conversations blending with the soft music playing in the background. Kalen guided Rin to a corner table and gestured for her to sit. "Wait here," he said. "I'll get us something to eat." Rin nodded, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. She felt out of place in the cozy setting, her tattered cloak and dirt-smudged face starkly contrasting with the restaurant's polished decor. Several patrons glanced her way, their expressions ranging from curious to dismissive, but no one said anything. A meal to remember. When Kalen returned, he carried a tray laden with steaming plates of food. Rin's eyes widened as he set the dishes on the table, a bowl of fragrant soup, a plate of grilled vegetables, and a basket of freshly baked bread. "Eat," Kalen said, sliding a plate toward her. "You look like you need it more than I do." Rin hesitated, her gaze flicking between the food and Kalen. I don't have any money to pay for this," she said softly. "I didn't ask you to pay," Kalen replied, leaning back in his chair. "Just eat." Rin picked up a piece of bread, her hands trembling slightly, and took a small bite. The warm, savory flavor made her eyes sting with tears. She quickly wiped them away, not wanting Kalen to see. "Slow down," Kalen said with a smile as Rin began eating more quickly. "There's plenty to go around." For the first time in as long as she could remember, Rin felt full. When she finally set her fork down, she glanced at Kalen, her expression a mix of gratitude and suspicion. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "No one ever helps someone like me." Kalen's smile faded, replaced by a thoughtful look. "Let's just say I've been where you are," he said, "and I know what it's like to feel invisible." Rin's eyes softened, and for a moment, the walls she had built around herself began to crumble. A growing connection. Over the next hour, Kalen and Rin talked. She told him about how she had ended up on Zenthra Prime, abandoned by a crew of smugglers who had taken her from her homeworld and left her to fend for herself. Kalen listened without interrupting, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. When she finished, he leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. "You've been through a lot, Rin," he said, "but you don't have to do it alone anymore." Rin looked at him, her glowing patterns flickering faintly. "What do you mean?" "I mean you've got someone looking out for you now," Kalen said. "If you want it." Rin hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to refuse. But deep down, she knew she couldn't go back to the life she had been living. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "I'll trust you." Kalen smiled, his dark eyes warm. "Good. Let's get you cleaned up and figure out where we go from here." As they left the restaurant together, Rin felt a flicker of hope for the first time in years. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: her life was about to change. Chapter 2. A Second Chance. The bustling streets of Zenthra Prime were far less daunting with Kalen walking beside her. Rin still felt small and out of place amidst the towering neon signs and the swirl of diverse alien species, but she was no longer invisible. She felt the weight of Kalen's presence, a quiet strength that made the chaos seem less overwhelming. After leaving the restaurant, they made their way toward the edge of the marketplace, where the city grew quieter. Kalen led her to a modest building nestled between two larger ones. Its exterior was worn but clean, the sign above the door displaying the name Haven Repairs in simple lettering. "This is your place?" Rin asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Kalen nodded, opening the door and motioning for her to step inside. The interior was a mix of living quarters and workshop space. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with tools, spare parts, and a few scattered trinkets from Kalen's travels. A small kitchenette occupied one corner, and a simple cot was tucked away in another. "It's not much," Kalen said, setting his bag down on a workbench. "But it's home." Rin stood awkwardly near the door, unsure of what to do. She had spent so long surviving on her own that the concept of safety, let alone hospitality, felt foreign. Kalen seemed to sense her hesitation. "Relax," he said, pulling a chair out from the table. "You're safe here. Sit down, and I'll find you something clean to wear." The first night, Rin sat stiffly in the chair, her gaze darting around the room. She couldn't remember the last time she had been inside a real home, let alone one as warm and inviting as this. When Kalen returned with a set of clothes, a simple shirt and pants, she accepted them gratefully. "There's a washroom in the back," he said, gesturing toward a door. "Take your time." Rin nodded and made her way to the washroom. The sight of her reflection in the mirror startled her. The grime on her face and the hollows under her eyes made her look older than her years. Her glowing bioluminescent patterns, a hallmark of her Kyverian heritage, were faint and uneven, a reflection of her weakened state. The warm water felt like a luxury as she scrubbed away the dirt and grime. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of what it meant to be clean, to feel human, know herself again. When she emerged from the washroom, wearing the borrowed clothes, Kalen was in the kitchenette, preparing something that smelled delicious. "Thought you might want some tea," he said, setting a steaming mug on the table. "It's a local blend. Helps you sleep." Rin hesitated, then sat down, cradling the mug in her hands. The warmth seeped into her fingers, and the scent of the tea was calming. "Thank you," she said softly. Kalen nodded, sitting across from her. "You don't have to thank me, Rin. You've been through enough. Everyone deserves a chance to start over." Rin sipped her tea, her glowing eyes meeting his. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Adjusting to a new life. The days that followed were a mix of awkwardness and discovery for Rin. Kalen, true to his word, treated her with kindness and patience, showing her the basics of life beyond survival. He taught her how to use the kitchen appliances, how to patch torn clothes, and even how to fix small devices in his workshop. At first, Rin was hesitant to touch anything, afraid she might break it. But Kalen encouraged her, his steady demeanor giving her the confidence to try. Slowly, she began to find her footing. "You've got a knack for this," Kalen said one afternoon, watching as Rin carefully soldered a broken circuit board. Rin glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I used to fix things back home," she said. "My father taught me." Kalen's expression softened. "You don't talk about your home much?" Rin's smile faded, her glowing patterns dimming slightly. "There's not much to say. The Kyverian colonies were attacked by raiders. Most of us didn't make it." "I'm sorry," Kalen said quietly. Rin nodded, her gaze dropping to the circuit board in her hands. "It was a long time ago." Kalen didn't press further, sensing that she wasn't ready to share more. Instead, he handed her another part to work on, letting her set the pace of their conversation. New challenges. Despite her progress, life on Zenthra Prime was not without its dangers. One evening, as Kalen and Rin returned from a supply run, they noticed a group of rough-looking individuals loitering near the workshop. Their clothing marked them as members of the local Gang A faction that controlled much of the city's underworld. Kalen's jaw tightened as he approached the building, keeping himself between Rin and the gang. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone even but firm. The leader, a tall man with cybernetic implants and a cruel smile, stepped forward. "Word is you've taken in a Kyverian girl," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "We've got some buyers interested in her kind." Rin froze, her glowing patterns dimming as fear gripped her. Kalen, however, didn't flinch. "You're not laying a finger on her," he said, his voice steady. "Now, get off my property." The leader chuckled darkly, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Kalen. "You've got guts, old man. But guts won't stop us if we decide to take what we want." Kalen's hand moved subtly to the plasma wrench at his belt. "Try me." For a tense moment, the two stared each other down. Finally, the leader smirked and motioned for his crew to back off. "You've got yourself a reprieve for now, but this isn't over." As the gang disappeared into the shadows, Kalen turned to Rin, his expression softening. "You okay?" Rin nodded shakily. "Why did you stand up to them? They could have killed you." Kalen shrugged. "Because no one deserves to be treated like that. Not on my watch." Rin's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her gratitude too overwhelming for words. A bond forged. That night, as Rin lay awake in her borrowed bed, she thought about everything Kalen had done for her. He had given her food, shelter, and a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. But more than that, he had given her hope, a chance to rebuild her life. The chapter ends with Rin resolving to repay Kalen's kindness, determined to prove that she is more than just a victim. For the first time in her life, she feels like she has a future, and she won't let anything take it away. Chapter 3. A Threat Returns. Rin's days at Haven Repairs passed in relative peace, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Kalen kept a watchful eye on the workshop, always checking the perimeter and double-bolting the doors at night. Though he never voiced his concern, Rin could see it in his furrowed brow and the way his hand hovered near his plasma wrench. For her part, Rin threw herself into learning everything she could about the repair trade. Kalen's workshop was a treasure trove of knowledge, and under his patient guidance, she began to regain confidence in her abilities. She was no longer just surviving, she was contributing. But the shadow of the gang loomed over them, a constant reminder that safety was fleeting. The warning. One evening, as Rin was repairing a small drone in the back room, Kalen returned from a supply run, his face pale and his movements hurried. "What happened?" Rin asked, setting down her tools. "They've marked us," Kalen said grimly, locking the front door behind him. "The gang's spreading word that anyone who does business with us will regret it. They're trying to cut us off from the market." Rin's stomach sank. "Why are they doing this?" "It's me, isn't it?" Kalen sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's not your fault, Rin. They see you as a commodity, something they can profit from. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let them have their way. What can we do? Rin asked, her glowing eyes wide with worry. Kalen paused, his expression hardening. We fight back. Setting a trap. Kalen's plan was simple but dangerous. Using the workshop's surveillance system, he rigged a decoy signal, a false message that appeared to offer information about Rin's location. It was bait meant to lure the gang into a controlled confrontation. Rin watched nervously as Kalen worked late into the night, adjusting sensors and testing the signal. Are you sure this will work? She asked. It'll work, Kalen said, his tone firm. These types can't resist a lead. When they show up, we'll be ready. Rin hesitated, then said, Let me help. Kalen looked at her, his expression softening. You've been through enough. You don't need to put yourself in more danger. I'm not a child, Rin said, her voice steady. I'm not going to hide while you risk your life for me. We're in this together. Kalen studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's get to work. The ambush. The gang arrived 3 nights later. Rin and Kalen watched from the shadows of the workshop as 4 heavily armed thugs approached, their leader the man with the cybernetic implants at the front. The workshop's main room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of a single console. The gang spread out cautiously, their weapons raised. You sure she's here? One of the thugs asked, his voice echoing in the silence. The leader smirked. The signal doesn't lie. She's close. From her hiding spot, Rin's heart raced. She glanced at Kalen, who gave her a reassuring nod before triggering the first phase of their trap. With a press of a button, Kalen activated a series of electromagnetic pulses hidden in the walls. The pulses disrupted the gang's weapons and comms, leaving them momentarily stunned. Now, Kalen whispered. Rin darted forward, using a small, modified drone to disable one of the thugs with a burst of non-lethal electricity. The man collapsed, his weapon clattering to the floor. Kalen stepped into the light, his plasma wrench in hand. You picked the wrong place to mess with. The gang leader recovered quickly, drawing a knife as his cybernetic eye locked onto Kalen. You think you're clever, old man? He growled. You've only made this worse for yourself. We'll see about that, Kalen said, his voice calm but deadly. The fight. The workshop erupted into chaos as the gang regrouped. One thug lunged at Kalen, only to be met with a precise swing of the plasma wrench that sent him sprawling. Rin, meanwhile, used the drone to keep another thug at bay, her hands trembling but her resolve unwavering. The leader, however, was relentless. His cybernetic implants gave him enhanced strength and speed, and he quickly closed the distance between himself and Kalen. The two clashed in a brutal melee, sparks flying as the leader's knife clashed against Kalen's wrench. Rin watched in horror as Kalen was forced onto the defensive, the gang leader's attacks relentless. Summoning every ounce of courage, she grabbed a nearby energy tool, a device she had recently repaired, and charged forward. Leave him alone, she shouted, driving the tool into the leader's side. The burst of energy sent him reeling, his knife clattering to the floor. Kalen seized the opportunity, delivering a final blow that left the leader unconscious. A narrow victory. When the dust settled, the gang lay incapacitated, their weapons scattered across the floor. Rin sank to her knees, her glowing patterns flickering with exhaustion. You okay? Kalen asked, kneeling beside her. Rin nodded, her breaths shaky. I didn't think I could do it. You did great, Kalen said, his voice filled with pride. But we're not done yet. He quickly secured the gang members with makeshift restraints and activated a distress beacon, summoning the local authorities. Within an hour, law enforcement arrived to take the thugs into custody. As the officers led the gang away, one of them approached Kalen. You two were lucky, she said. These guys are dangerous. We know, Kalen replied. That's why we dealt with them. A turning point. With the gang neutralized, life at Haven Repairs slowly returned to normal. Rin, however, felt different. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of control over her life, a feeling she hadn't thought possible. You're not the same girl I found in the marketplace, Kalen said one evening as they worked on a repair together. Rin smiled, her glowing patterns steady and bright. That's because you gave me a chance to change. You gave yourself that chance, Kalen said. I just gave you a push. As they finished the repair, Rin looked at Kalen with a newfound sense of determination. I don't know what's next, but I want to keep helping you here. I want to learn more, do more. Kalen nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You're always welcome here, Rin. This place wouldn't be the same without you. The chapter ends with Rin and Kalen sharing a quiet moment in the workshop, their bond stronger than ever as they look toward a future filled with hope and possibility. Chapter 4. A New Horizon. Life at Haven Repairs settled into a rhythm after the gang's defeat. Rin blossomed under Kalen's mentorship, her confidence growing with each passing day. Customers began to trickle back into the shop, word spreading of their victory over the local gang. Kalen's reputation as a reliable mechanic and a protector only grew, and Rin became an integral part of his operation. But Rin's heart was restless. Though she found solace in her work and the safety of Haven Repairs, the galaxy beyond Zenthra Prime called to her a reminder of both her past and the possibilities of her future. An unexpected visitor. One morning, as Rin tinkered with a hover droid brought in by a local merchant, a loud hum filled the workshop. She glanced up to see a sleek starship descending toward the open landing pad behind the shop. Its polished silver surface reflected the morning sun, and its design was far more advanced than anything she'd seen on Zenthra Prime. Kalen stepped out from the back room, wiping his hands on a rag. That's not a local ship, he said, his voice wary. The ship's hatch opened with a hiss, and a figure emerged, a tall, imposing woman clad in a sleek uniform adorned with the emblem of the Galactic Coalition, the galaxy's largest governing body. Her sharp features and piercing gaze immediately commanded attention. Is this Haven Repairs? The woman asked, her voice crisp and authoritative. It is, Kalen replied, stepping forward cautiously. What can we do for you? The woman's eyes flicked to Rin, who stood frozen beside the workbench. I'm Captain Elise Varen, commanding officer of the Stellar Dawn. I've come to speak with her. Rin's glowing eyes widened in surprise. Me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Varen said, her tone softening slightly. You're Kyverian, aren't you? Rin nodded hesitantly. I am. The captain approached, her expression unreadable. We've been searching for survivors of the Kyverian colonies. Your people's disappearance left a void in the Coalition's records and in its conscience. You're one of the first we've found. A difficult choice. Captain Varen explained that the Coalition was launching a program to locate and support Kyverian survivors, offering them resources and opportunities to rebuild their lives. She extended an invitation for Rin to join the initiative, promising training, education, and the chance to explore the galaxy. It's a rare opportunity, Varen said, but it's your choice. No one will force you. Rin's heart raced. The prospect of leaving Zenthra Prime and joining the Coalition was both exhilarating and terrifying. She glanced at Kalen, who had remained silent throughout the conversation. What do you think? She asked him, her voice trembling. Kalen crossed his arms, his brow furrowed in thought. It's not my decision to make, Rin, but whatever you choose, you've got my support. Rin nodded, her glowing patterns flickering as she wrestled with the decision. The workshop had become her sanctuary, and Kalen had become the closest thing to family she'd known in years. Leaving would mean stepping into the unknown, a risk she wasn't sure she was ready to take. But the thought of staying, of never knowing what lay beyond Zenthra Prime, filled her with an ache she couldn't ignore. I'll go, she said finally, her voice steady. I want to see what's out there. Captain Varen nodded approvingly. You've made a wise choice. Preparing to leave. The days leading up to Rin's departure were bittersweet. Kalen helped her gather supplies and taught her everything he could about surviving in the wider galaxy. They spent hours in the workshop, talking and working side by side as they always had, but an unspoken tension lingered between them. You're going to do great out there, Kalen said one evening as they sat on the landing pad, watching the stars. You've got the skills, the brains, and the guts. Rin smiled faintly. I wouldn't have any of those without you. Don't sell yourself short, Kalen replied. You had it in you all along. I just helped you see it. The silence that followed was comfortable but heavy with the weight of their impending separation. Rin reached out and took Kalen's hand, her glowing patterns bright and steady. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. Kalen squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to thank me, kid. Just promise me you'll look after yourself out there. I will, Rin said, her voice firm. A new journey. The day of Rin's departure arrived too quickly. The Stellar Dawn's engines hummed as the ship prepared for takeoff, its sleek silhouette a stark contrast to the humble workshop that had become Rin's home. Captain Varen stood by the hatch, waiting patiently as Rin said her goodbyes. I'll miss this place, Rin said, her voice thick with emotion. It'll always be here, Kalen replied, his gruff tone betraying a hint of sadness. And so will I. If you ever need a place to land, you know where to find me. Rin nodded, blinking back tears. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, a holocom she had repaired herself. Keep this, she said, pressing it into Kalen's hand, so we can stay in touch. Kalen smiled, slipping the device into his jacket. You bet. As Rin boarded the ship, she turned back one last time, her glowing eyes meeting Kalen's. Goodbye, Kalen. Goodbye, Rin, he said, his voice quiet but steady. The hatch closed, and the Stellar Dawn lifted off, its engines roaring as it ascended into the sky. Rin watched through the window as Haven repairs grew smaller and smaller, a knot of emotions tightening in her chest. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing: she was ready to face it. Epilogue. The stars await. Rin stood on the bridge of the Stellar Dawn, her glowing patterns bright and steady as she gazed out at the vast expanse of space. Captain Varen approached, her expression thoughtful. You made a brave choice, Varen said. Not everyone would leave behind what they know for the unknown. Rin nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars. I spent too long surviving. Now it's time to live. The ship surged forward, the stars stretching into streaks of light as they jumped to hyperspace. For the first time in years, Rin felt free, a girl who had once eaten off the ground, now reaching for the stars.